The protagonist called Hung is tormented and haunted by a physical embodiment of her deepest subconscious anxiety and negative thoughts in the form of a shaking and nervous wolf called Bibi. Hung, throughout the story, tries to silence Bibi and overcome him and the negative thoughts, thinking he's the source of all of her misery, but in one life-changing event, she comes to the realization that Bibi is not completely irrational and may be a helpful and necessary ally to have as a companion. Hi folks, I'm R, your narrator, and welcome to 2023. Have you ever thought your anxiety and negative thoughts are the root of your unhappiness, restricting you from reaching your full potential? So have I, but what if it's not all irrational and actually necessary at times? But at the same time, they need to be kept at bay and reasoned with. Keep in mind that this video will have spoilers ahead as always, and with that in mind, let's begin. The main protagonist, Hung, is a teenage girl who has a distinct red hoodie with dog ears in a monochrome world, which later is revealed to be a spirit animal representing Hung's internal thoughts and anxiety. Hung is a nervous girl who has anxiety disorder, always in a battle trying to break free and live a normal life, interacting with others without any restraints. Her anxiety is in the shape of a wolf labeled Bibi, who acts as a guard dog, trying to protect his human from dangers and harm, but Bibi's overprotectiveness proves to cause more harm, as it prevents Hung from socializing and being truly happy, which in a turn becomes a metaphor of the wolf being the big bad wolf, with Hung being the vulnerable Red Riding Hood. Despite the wolf's constant, overbearing, stressful, piercing thoughts and warnings, the story depicts how he truly loves his human, but due to lack of enough training, it acts more like a battered, out-of-control shelter dog who doesn't recognize the difference between real danger and trivial matters. The story starts with Hung sitting alone on a tree stump eating a white bread sandwich. The anxiety wolf, being the manifestation of Hung's internal thoughts, soon emerges out with piercing thoughts, warning Hung on the consequences of the current situation, on how she needs to be with others than staying alone, on how white bread is bad for health, and how she's not being productive. This causes Hung to get emotionally drained, slightly portrayed in health bars. Both Hung and Bibi have their own respective health bars, depicting how they are in a constant battle of who wins. If Bibi manages to win the arguments in the form of battles, he gets to dictate his human of what to do in the form of fight or flight responses. Bibi gets to manipulate Hung using three forms of primal fears: physical, social, and moral sentiments. Physical fear scares Hung of physical harm she could sustain on a day-to-day basis. Social fear worries her of how she could be lonely and unloved based on her actions, and the moral fear makes her overthink how her actions could make her a bad person. These are fears in form of thousands of daily thoughts that cloud Hung's mind and her ability of decision-making, which leads to the creation of a symbolic animal that is known to be Bibi, the overprotective guardian wolf who, instead of effectively helping her human, causes her to get emotionally exhausted and does the exact opposite. But at the same time, the fear helps Hung in certain times to protect herself. Trying to ease her mind and distract herself from the overbearing wolf, Hung pulls out her phone, noticing a notification from her Facebook that she's invited to a party by someone called Hunter, a seemingly popular cat who throws parties every weekend, being awfully strange even to someone like Hung. Whether Hunter is suffering from their own internal problems, using parties as a way to escape from reality. Bibi, being a fidgeting stress ball, uses the three primal fears to play with Hung's emotions and mind. That she will make the party sad, she will get harmed as there will be drugs and alcohol, and finally, that she needs to go as otherwise she would be lonely. Giving his answer, always having a fear overshadowing each thought, Bibi keeps changing his mind, unable to make a clear and reasonable conclusion, bringing up all the concerning possibilities that Hung could face. Hung using other social apps such as Tinder, Twitter, and Instagram, Bibi keeps bugging her and filling her mind with negativity, how everything has consequences, which leads to Hung getting emotionally drained, confronting her anxiety animal on how everyone on social media looks happy and stress-free, while while she, on the other hand, is scared of everything and can't live her life happily. This is of course one of the main disadvantages of social media on how everyone pretends to be happy, not showing the true them and the problems they face on a daily basis. This as a result produces unwanted anxiety and more problems, making people become over-competitive all the time and become unhappy with their normal, boring lives. Which of course is a main aspect of living every day, trying to make a living, being on a routine over and over again. So of course lives can be very boring, but social media tries to push and portray the idea that life can be happy all the time and full of adventures and new things to do. This shocks the wolf as he truly wants to protect Hung and doesn't understand the damaging comments he constantly makes, leaving a scar on Hung, who can't keep his silence and screams uncontrollably in stress and fear. This directly gives the wolf the ability to dictate Hung's next actions, using fight or flight, whether breaking her phone due to the severity of mental impact it left on her, or curl up and cry as a way of flight. Regardless to being defeated by her anxiety, Hung ultimately decides to go to the party. In the party, Hung notices people already in their groups talking and being distracted. She tries to make some small talk, not being loud and confident to approach the groups, which leads to her anxiety animal reappearing, warning her about everything and anything she could think about. Despite Bibi being a mess and chaotic, he makes some valid points about Hung's surroundings and valid dangers she could face, such as the punch being spiked or tampered with, which in a way points out that not all anxious and worrying thoughts are baseless and pointless. Some in fact do help people to survive, as after all, fear is an evolutionary ally which more advanced species have obtained throughout thousands of years to protect themselves. Despite Hung's relentless efforts to ignore Bibi and use positive reinforcement, the wolf manages to pierce its concerning thoughts and emotionally manipulate opinions into her mind, which breaks her down, being on the verge of losing her emotional energy. Hung explains how she tried to ignore Bibi, fully aware that he's nothing but a figment of her imagination, being the metaphor and representation of her internal thoughts, manifested as a guard dog trying to protect her, as after all, Hung is an educated young girl who knows about science and evolution, trying to disregard it as an irrational feeling, using another scientific argument that fear amongst people is useless nowadays. Subconsciously, Hung perceives Bibi as the villain, in other words, the big bad wolf, instead of the guard dog it's supposed to be. A dog that was supposed to be protective at first, but someone that got broken became useless and became the wolf. Confronting Bibi on how he's useless, irrational and unneeded, just the culprit of Hung's misery, Bibi gets sad, saying all he wanted to do was to protect her, and despite what Hung believes, fear is an important element of humans' happiness and survival, if of course used in balance. But one thing that Bibi doesn't get right is the awareness of situations and how much fear is required at each given time. Just distracted and fully submerged in her own thoughts, someone comes over called Hunter with a distinctive red hair, explaining how Hung was caught arguing with herself, something that she is fully aware of, as well as Hunter has her own anxiety animal which she desperately tries to starve and keep at bay. Hunter continues that she throws these parties every weekend because she suffers from anxiety herself, with these parties helping people to relieve their stress and let loose. She then explains that she used to be just like Hung before, but using a trick allowed her to shut her anxiety animal up and be free. That's when she offers Hung a bottle of booze, saying how it's stronger than anything that is legally available, clearly being a horrible influence, using alcohol as a way of coping mechanism instead of dealing with the anxiety in a rational manner. As alcohol is not the answer, it only makes the person forget the question. Bibi tries very hard to dissuade Hung from taking a sip, thinking of all the negative possibilities, especially that alcohol could lead to addiction if used for a way to cope and overcome anxiety. As it's never a permanent solution, in a way, it could make the person become dependent on it. Also, being in a state completely losing rational thinking could lead to many bad decisions. Despite Bibi's relentless efforts, Hung keeps on drinking when all of a sudden Bibi uses a special attack, giving Hung an imminent feeling of fear, whether it be death, complete isolation, or transformation into a villain. This forces Hung to leave the party, but knocking Bibi down in anger, giving him an ultimatum that next weekend she'll be back to the party and she would win. Time passes on and next weekend arrives with Hung on a rooftop drinking with Hunter, while she has her red hoodie around around her waist, implying how her anxiety is repressed, with Bibi faded and nowhere to be seen. While talking to Hunter, she explains how she used to have an anxiety animal of her own, which she defeated, referring to it as a beast, a completely unnecessary and detrimental entity. She then dares Hung to jump off the roof into the pool, saying how thrill-seeking and partying hard helped her shut off her anxiety, clearly showing how Hunter's anxiety has pushed her to the edge of living an unhealthy life, having an unhealthy relationship with fear. She continues how anxiety and fear is a parasite that tortures people, a useless element that needs to be eliminated. Her toxic and manipulative peer pressure convinces Hung to jump when all of a sudden Bibi emerges from the deepest source of her anxiety and self-awareness. Bibi tries his old-fashioned way of scaring Hung from making bad decisions, trying to make her feel bad or bring reason, but with every attempt, Hung takes another step, rendering even Bibi's special attack useless, with Hung having full power. Hung explains how people use different ways to distract themselves from the constant whining of the annoying voice inside their heads. Some using alcohol and drugs, some using dangerous thrills, some being downright self-destructive and abusive, with her, right now, wanting to jump down to the pool to stop Bibi. This time around, instead of moaning and crying on how dangerous this could be, Bibi simply apologizes for being so clingy and detrimental to Hung's life. What a horrible protector he's been and how he messed up everything. It takes Hung some time to calm down after seeing how vulnerable Bibi is, noticing that it's almost defeated. That's when she listens to reason and Bibi, the representation of her fear, admits this is a stupid decision and that she tried to do this just to shut Bibi up, doing this as a revenge. But now that Bibi is powerless, she uses her wits and common sense to stop. She calls this round of the battle a tie and explains how she knows Bibi is right, despite being too much usually. Just as she drops the bottle and turns away from the ledge, Hunter goes on her self-righteous rants on how Hung let her animal win and how scared she is, being toxic and trying to gaslight her, reflecting her own internal unsolved problems. A mature and smart Hung, instead of arguing and giving in to her tricks, simply puts her hoodie back on, her anxiety which acts both as her friend, savior, and source of misery, saying how she truly is scared and how it's all fine to be scared, while walking away, leaving a chaotic and mess of a person who is Hunter behind. As the night passes, Hung goes back to the tree stump, eating her white bread sandwich, repeating her day just like before, when Bibi appears with Hung being embarrassed and tired, admitting how her friends weren't really friends. They were toxic and didn't care about her, being horrible influences with what they wanted, being the idea of being helpful, pushing Hung to the edge of death just for their self-righteous agendas. That's when Bibi has a moment of clarity that they just faced a near-death experience, all because he pushed her to that point, and everything else in comparison to that event seems minuscule on how they still survived, which makes him think he's not really a good protector and causes more damage than good. Hung also confesses fighting Bibi only makes it worse, with Bibi just getting louder and more controlling when he is defied, which makes them have a truce that they shouldn't fight but instead find a balance, with Bibi realizing it's not truly a heroic protector, but a battered shelter dog who tries desperately to help and protect his human, but majority of the time causes more problems, overreacting and over-escalating everything. He continues that he loves Hung and wants to be a good dog, but admits that he needs training and taming, which starts by talking in peace and coming to terms with everything. This time around, Hung asks Bibi what he's really scared of, to which Hung rationally answers, finding a good solution for each fear, allowing players to actually control Hung's dialogue, including Bibi at the same time, indicating how it's all been Hung since the beginning. She just didn't find it within herself to face her fears and come to terms with them. Instead of an argument and battle, this time around, Bibi and Hung sit around and try to come to terms with their fears and anxieties, confirming how they aren't easy and they won't be as simple as clicking on the screen and having quick moments of inspiration. It's a work in progress and will always be there, but what is really important is that they need to be acknowledged and looked at. Instead of being ignored or let loose to take control, there must be a balance and dealt with. Bad thoughts and insecurities, anxieties and horrible imageries will creep their way into mind again and again, but as Bibi mentions, the out-of-control barking dog, one needs to be patient, paying attention to this old, battered dog, so they learn the way and get reminded. While sitting and trying to have a common understanding, another character by the name of Al, who has a red hair clip, which is the representation of her own anxiety animal, being a cat called Shire, approaches Hung and tries to admit she has a crush on her. But as soon as they have a small talk, Al runs in embarrassment and fear, letting her wild anxiety animal take over. Just as Hung and Bibi respect each other and make plans on how to face their anxieties, Bibi goes on a barking spree, stressing out trivial things again, revealing how anxiety always creeps back, but instead of being angry at them, indifferent, sad, defeated, or resentful, they need to be paid attention to and find solutions and a common ground. On the other hand, if Bibi acts the same and tries to plead with Hung not to jump from the rooftop, this agitates Hung, who keeps on drinking to the point that she blanks out her anxiety, jumping off the roof, which of course ends badly, going to emergency, breaking both of her legs. Regardless to her stupid decision, realizing that Hunter was using her, whether intentionally or not, Bibi and Hung yet again come to terms and have common ground, with Hung learning how fear is so important and a way of protection, while Bibi learns that his overbearing remarks and overprotectiveness pushed Hung to the edge. In the credit scene, it reveals how Hunter never truly got rid of her anxiety animal, being an elephant called Graham, shown to be standing over her while she's sleeping, having an extremely concerned face. Hunter, on the other hand, is sad while sleeping and very annoyed whenever Graham appears, revealing how she tries to ignore it, which she thinks to be effective. Regardless, this unhealthy relationship portrays how her desperate desire to be free of fear and concern has restrained Graham, pushing Hunter into an unhealthy lifestyle, being drunk all the time, wasting her time talking to toxic people just like herself, going deeper and deeper to the swamp she has created for herself, trying not to listen to reason just in a desperate attempt to silence irrational and at times irrational fears and anxious thoughts. Hunter sleeping on the couch also reveals how she spends most of her alone time being on a couch trying to pass out to silence Graham, not being productive or doing anything positive in her life. Her vision and perception has only been veiled by the idea of happiness and fearlessness, while in fact it makes her truly miserable and unhappy. That's because life is not as perfect as many people try to portray it, and it's not as bad as what negative thoughts try to depict it. Life has certain dangers, certain actions have consequences, a lot of times with no return or remedy. Some people like Hunter, who have silenced their anxiety animals, can be dangerous and toxic, and life in general is difficult, and one needs to constantly work and try to have a healthy life, paying bills, and maybe reach true happiness. But also, it's not all doom and gloom. There must be a balance, and it is a work in progress for everyone. There are also some varieties in the game in which if Hung cries in a fetal position, a lake named Lake of Tears, appears next to the stump, but if she smashes her phone, a tombstone appears saying RIP phone. Also, through the dialogue between Bibi and Hung, it's evident that she's well-read and educated, knowing many case laws, quotes from iconic individuals and well-known characters in the world, which immensely helps her find answers for many of her problems. Yet, it's always easier said than done, and in practice, they take a lot more. This also at times acts against her, because for every positive answer, there's always a negative argument, according to real-life events and occurrences. And that's it for this video, folks. I truly hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to stay tuned by hitting on the subscribe button and the notification bell. It's been your host Star, and I will see you on the next one. Have a happy new year.